The title of this story is obviously a play on the epic novel Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Although the author is the first to admit that he lacks the genius of the woman who challenged the nation to take a hard look at itself and the issue of slavery, he makes no apologies for using the fame of that momentous catalyst of change in creating this fictional account. Indeed, if she were alive today, Mrs. Stowe may well have written this book too, for she was a woman who lived in a time of great suffering and evil and was committed to doing her part to make this a better world. Hence, the author feels a smile of approval shining down from heaven. It is difficult for us to imagine in this day and age that such an abhorrent evil as the enslavement of an entire race could ever have been possible in a nation such as ours. Yet it happened. Man is a sinner, self-interest is inherent. Greed is one manifestation of man's nature. This being true, it is possible to understand how a large region of the country not only employed the system of slavery as a means to economic prosperity, but it did so without a disturbed conscience. In fact, politicians and clergy alike improvised scores of rationalizations to defend slavery. Incredible as it seems, some tried to draw support for slavery out of the Bible. And just as incredible, so many good people did nothing to abolish it. That is, until Uncle Tom's Cabin created such a moral embarrassment for its generation of Americans, both nationally and internationally, that the issue could no longer be swept under the rug. Slavery had to be addressed, ultimately through civil war. Abortion, like slavery, is evil. It is the triumph of selfishness and self-deceit over the sanctity of human life. One day this fact will be as clear to Americans as we now unanimously admit that slavery was unjustifiable in its day. The parallels between these two evils are striking and, to men and women of conscience, haunting. The reason abortion has become acceptable in our society is because individuals and factions have turned this moral issue into a political issue. Put simply, the pro-abortion faction has obfuscated the morality of abortion with clever rhetoric and rationalization. The real issue, pro-abortionists say, is not the sanctity of human life, but the right of a woman to control what happens within her own body. According to pro-abortionists, there is no conflict between the child's right to life and the woman's choice to end the child's life because the fetus is less than human and thus has no rights. In addition, pro-abortionists claim that a woman not only has a right to terminate the child's life, but she also has a right to privacy about the matter. Hence, abortion is not about right and wrong, the issue is power. Historically, a similar argument was made in support of slavery before the Civil War. Was it right for one man to own another? As today, the moral question was turned into a political issue. The issue, Southerners said, was not about the morality of slavery, it was about states' rights. They sidestepped the ethical aspect of slavery by constantly pointing to the right of a state to determine what happens within its own jurisdiction. When the issue of slavery arose in the developing Western territories, Stephen Douglas, the notorious political rival of Abraham Lincoln, proposed an insidious twist to the concept of states' rights. Douglas insisted that the matter of slavery be determined by popular sovereignty. In other words, Douglas wanted the people in a territory to choose whether or not they would have slaves. Using contemporary rhetoric, Senator Douglas was pro-choice on the issue of slavery. Finally, let us not forget that Southerners also made the argument that Africans were less than human, hence they did not have any rights. Blacks were property, not people. In the final analysis, then, slavery was not about right and wrong, the issue was power. It is not surprising, then, that today's pro-life movement is strikingly similar to the abolitionist movement of the 19th century. The present battle against abortion is being led primarily by national and state pro-life organizations, local pro-life crisis pregnancy counseling centers, pro-life newspapers, and pro-life activists, most of whom are Christians. These organizations and individuals are clearly the New England Anti-Slavery Society, Underground Railroad, Liberator, and William Lloyd Garrisons of today. Unfortunately, however, the pro-life crusade today also has a radical element, albeit a minuscule minority. These extremists and terrorists that commit violence for the sake of righteousness do so as modern-day John Browns. Tragically, they only complicate the situation by perpetuating their own evils under the belief that the end justifies the means. They neither understand the gospel nor realize how counterproductive they are by doing God's work through Satan's methods. On the one hand, it was a momentous misfortune that the issue of slavery could only be resolved by civil war. On the other hand, the war was such that the enemy could be easily targeted and force brought to bear to put an end to the enslavement of Africans. Today, unfortunately, the battle is not so simple as North versus South. The distinctions that separate pro-life and pro-abortion camps are not geographical or based on gender, race, socioeconomic status, or religious or political affiliation. The difference between camps is solely in the heart and conscience of every American. Thus, the only real hope for the unborn is to change the hearts of men and women. We were once a nation that believed in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, as evidenced by our politics, news media, and entertainment industry, we cherish only liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Sadly, these two may only be euphemisms for licentiousness and hedonism. What happened to the sanctity and value of life? And last, beyond the political, philosophical, moral, and scientific debates surrounding abortion, there is God's view on the matter, which comes out very clearly as He speaks to us through His Word. In the Old Testament, in Psalm 106, verses 37 to 40, Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 21, and in numerous places in 2 Kings, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, God is unequivocal when He says that He abhors child sacrifice and will bring judgment upon the perpetrators. To understand these passages of Scripture requires a little background on the pagan worship of Baal or Molech, the fertility god. In Phoenicia and Carthage, and later in Canaan, followers of this false god offered living children, their firstborn sons or daughters, in hope of greater fertility of soil and womb. The manner of this sacrifice was abhorrent, though not any more so than our shredding of fetuses today. In ancient practice, infant children were placed in the lap of a statue representing Molech. While on the lap of this false god, fires were ignited and burned ferociously, thus consuming the flesh of innocent newborns whose cries of pain were drowned out by the blaring of trumpets and the piping of flutes. The question is, what kind of civilization could allow such a thing to happen? And what kind of parents could do such a thing to their own flesh and blood? The thought of such a detestable practice is so grotesque, it is almost impossible to imagine. That is, until we remind ourselves what is happening in our own nation today. 4,000 times a day, every 20 seconds, an equally gruesome sacrifice is allowed to happen. What enlightenment of heart, mind, and soul would lead anyone to think that abortion, the poisoning and or mutilating of life in the womb, is any different than the live burning of an infant on a pagan altar? The times may have changed and the methods may have changed, but the sin is the same. In Jeremiah 32:35, the Lord declares, "They built high places for Baal in the valley of Ben-Hanan to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Molech, though I never commanded, nor did it enter my mind, that they should do such a detestable thing, and so make Judah sin." Meanwhile, Psalm 106 verses 37 to 40 makes it absolutely clear what God thinks of infanticide and abortion and those who allow it to happen. He who has an ear, let him hear. They sacrifice their sons and their daughters to demons. They shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was desecrated by their blood. They defiled themselves by what they did. By their deeds they prostituted themselves. Therefore the Lord was angry with His people and abhorred His inheritance. And so, having said all this, it is the prayer of this author that the reader's moral vision concerning abortion is brought back into focus by the ensuing sketches. Their purpose is simply to awaken sympathy and compassion, not only for the unborn and women who are confronted with an unwanted pregnancy, but also for those couples who so dearly want to have children but cannot. The scenes of this story hope to show there is an alternative to abortion. It is a choice founded on love and self-sacrifice, not power and self-interest. It is the narrow road less traveled. It is adoption. Those readers who hope for the day when righteousness will prevail may find comfort in the words that close the preface of Uncle Tom's Cabin. For while politicians contend and men are swerved this way and that by conflicting tides of interest and passion, the great cause of human liberty is in the hands of one of whom it is said, "He shall not fail nor be discouraged, till he have set judgment in the earth. He shall deliver the needy when he crieth, the poor and him that hath no helper. He shall redeem their soul from deceit and violence, and precious shall their blood be in his sight."